Hey everybody, we have made it to our final week of class. Amazing, huh? We've only got 3 days left. Classes end on Wednesday, June 21st. What this means for you is that you need to have all of your coursework in by that date. So if you've got anything that you just aren't going to turn in, that's fine, but anything that you're planning on submitting needs to be in by 11:59 on June 21st. Because that is the end of our class. It's the last day of classes. Then at 12:01 a.m. on June 22nd, so basically just after midnight on Wednesday, I will release the final exam, and that will show up as an assignment on Canvas just like all of the other assignments. And that will be due at 11:59 p.m. on Friday, June 23rd, which is the end of exam week. So as usual, summer session is just super short. And now that you've turned in your paper 2, your only other coursework for this week is your final reading quiz on snow crash, your Unit 3 reception, your receptions project conclusion, and a final discussion forum that will help you think about kind of the overall ideas of our course. So for the receptions project, Unit 3 will work just like the other 2 units. So make sure that you have a look at my feedback on your previous unit post. And you can also look at the receptions project unit post examples that I have made available on Canvas, and I will link those in the transcript to this announcement as well. And then for the receptions project conclusion, please remember that it asks you to reflect on every unit we've studied. The conclusion works very differently from the unit post. So please do reread those instructions if you haven't read them, or if you've already read them. And if you haven't read them, please read them very carefully. It's got different instructions from the unit post, and it has a different rubric from the unit post. So don't go into it expecting it to be just like the unit post. The 2 most common errors that I tend to see in the receptions project conclusion are failing to talk about every unit. So make sure you're not just talking about 1 or 2 units. You have to talk about all 3 units. And then failing to include textual evidence. So those are the 2 most common errors I see with the conclusion. So make sure that you are looking out for those and adhering to the instructions and the rubric that I've provided, and I will link that assignment also in the transcript for this announcement. Okay, so finally, the thing you probably really want to know about, which is the final exam for our class. The good news is it's cumulative, but it's open book. So the final exam is both open book and open notes. You're welcome to refer back to our textbooks and any notes that you've taken. The only thing I ask is that you do not use the internet to complete your exam, and that you do not collaborate with anyone else to complete your exam. So it should be all your work, your ideas. You're welcome to look at some of our discussion boards. So I generally pull from the stuff that we've been discussing throughout the semester, so you might have a look back at those. If you do want to include someone's idea from a discussion board discussion, including your own idea, please cite it in the format that I have included in the transcript for this announcement. So yes, you would need to say, hey, I'm building off of an idea that actually came up at this other place in the class. So it's important to provide attribution and acknowledge your sources, even if the source is you. From an earlier piece of work that you turned in. The exam will contain detailed instructions for all of the questions, but I'm going to go ahead and go over those, the format of the exam, just so that you can hear it more than once and so that you have a chance to hear me explain what's going on with each of these types of questions. So there are 3 different portions to the exam. There will be 2 short answer questions. You do not need evidence in these short answer questions, so I'm not expecting you to provide quotations for these. Just answer the discussion questions that I've asked in 2 to 4 sentences. The main goal of these is to show me that you're capable of discussing ideas about the text in our class. Make sure that you answer all parts of the question. This is the thing that tends to trip people up on the short answer. They might answer part of the question and then forget a different part. And I am going to ask you to include examples. So rather than just responding in a general or vague kind of way, I want you to be able to say, oh yeah, like when Enkidu did that thing, or like when Hiro did that other thing. So, I want you to provide examples even if you're not providing quotations. So that's something that you should be able to answer the short answer questions without necessarily needing to look at your books, but you are welcome to. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the level of specificity I'm asking for in these. The next section will be 2 passage identification questions. This might sound a little silly because it is an open book, open note exam, but it is important for you to be able to identify the names of these texts and who wrote them, because we are talking about cultures, and it is important to be able to place those texts in cultures and in time, because of course the texts we're looking at span thousands of years. But again, this is an open note and open book section as well. In these 2 questions, I will provide a passage, and then I will ask you to identify what the text is, who the author is, and if the author is unknown, you can simply write anonymous. And I will ask you why this particular passage that I've chosen is significant to the text as a whole. You'll need to talk about specific words and phrases in the passage to back up your answer. So you'll need to be quoting from the passage. And I'm asking you to quote from that passage that I've picked, not from a different passage that maybe you're more interested in, or maybe that we've done a discussion post on. The goal of this particular type of question is I want you to show me that you're capable of looking at a piece of text that someone gives you and being able to talk intelligently about it, being able to identify what is important about this text, both on the small detailed level, so this is where the words and phrases from the passage come in, and then also in the bigger level, what is the context of this passage? Why might this passage be important to the way that we understand the text? Does it provide a turning point? Does it show us some kind of important character development? Is it foreshadowing? Is it looking at larger themes of the text? So what's going on with this passage? Why might I have picked this particular one for us to think about in terms of that text? So I also wanted to let you know the number 1 error that I see on the passage ID questions is students failing to include those words and phrases quoted from the passage. It is, no matter how many times I say you need textual evidence, you need to quote from the passage, in these 2 questions, it's just the thing that I see very frequently. So if you want to boost your grade on your final, just make sure that you include those quoted words and phrases from the passage that I've provided. Okay, and that's those 2 sections of the exam, and then you will need to answer 1 essay question. I will provide more than 1 question, and then you'll choose one. Please do not respond to more than 1 essay question. If you do, I'll just grade the first one that you submit. The essay question will ask you to think about the text from different units in our text, in our syllabus. So it's a more comprehensive type of thinking that I'm asking you to do here. The essay does not require an introduction. I find that in an exam setting, introductions tend to distract students from the meat of their argument, so you can jump right in. You will need a thesis using the claim formula, and all of your body paragraphs will need the claim formula as well. You will also need to include textual evidence, preferably in the form of quotation, in your body paragraphs for your essay question. All evidence should also include parenthetical citations, just like you do in your regular essays for this class. I will not require you to do a works cited page for your essay as long as your quotations are coming from our textbook. So as long as they come from our textbook, then the parenthetical citation is sufficient because I can look up that page number and in the text and see what you were looking at. You will need to wrap up your ideas with a concluding section. It doesn't have to be long, but I do want you to be thinking about the big picture and what you have proven in the course of your essay. So that's all the big stuff for the class. We're almost there. I hope that you enjoy finishing up Snow Crash and watching the Avengers this week. As you finish our World Lit class with these two modern texts, I'd like for you to think about two things. First, what can these modern texts tell us about our own modern culture? What do we value? What do we abhor? What are these divine and diabolical character attributes for our culture? These might be different from what we would like to think that our culture values and what we would like to think that our culture abhors. It's sort of like the difference between thinking about how our culture values individualism. You know, like we all want to be our own individual. We don't want to be just like everybody else. Or is it that our culture values selfishness, you know, and everybody's looking out for themselves? This is the sort of thing that I want you to start thinking about critically with our own culture. It becomes easier to do this, to sort of turn that critical eye on our own culture, once you've had a chance to do it for other cultures that are very far removed from yours, whether through time or space or both. So that's the first thing I want you to think about. The second thing I want you to think about is how these alternate type genres can help us think about these cultural concepts. So how does the science fiction setting of Snow Crash help you understand something about what the culture values and abhors? How does the fantasy or comic book genre of the Avengers help you understand something about what the culture values or abhors? And how might looking at these blatantly fictional types of text help us see things that we might not be able to see in more realistic text? So those are just some questions to kind of get your gears turning this week as you finish up our class, looking at texts that are so very different from the ones that we started with, and looking at texts that are more American, modern American texts rather than the world literatures we've been looking at. So hopefully as you start thinking about these questions, you can start to recognize how world literature fits into our own experience of the world and our own experience of our own culture. Good luck working this week, our last few days of class, and as always, please email me if you have any questions, or you can post in the Q&A forum as well, which I will link in the transcript to this announcement. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks, everybody.